Ladies and gentlemen, when you go to the department store at Valentine, at Halloween, or at Christmas, any forms of the grammarization and also the glorification of choosing the love and choosing the best present for your partner can be the fulfillment option for your own life. That kind of the notion strong exists. And also, if you live alone and when you get home and after you go to the society, your parents and your grandparents structurally and continuously ask you, when you get married, I like to see the face of the grandchildren. Hurry up. That strong pressurization hinders the ability of the individual to choose what they want to do in their own life. We say inside affirmative that our life are dominated and contaminated by the strong notion surrounding the love. That's why we need to oppose this strong notion that exists, pre-existing in society. As Prime Minister, I'm going to bring you two constructive material. Number one, how under opposition's paradigm, strong pressurization hinder the individual to choose the alternate option that potentially maximizes the individual happiness. Secondly, as a counterfactor on our side of the house, how on our side of the house, without that strong notion, without a strong dominant narrative that the romantic love should be the primary source of the fulfillment, that individual can comparatively choose the best option for their own life. But before that, let me define, let me briefly set up what exactly we mean the fulfillment in a person's life. The fulfillment is a meaning that the spiritual or the material satisfaction for that individual. Not only the case of the romantic love, your life are determined by the fulfillment of the own spiritual satisfaction. For example, the clothes, food, or the schools, or any other choice that you can make can potentially maximize and fulfill the person's happiness and person's good mentality. And what we like to oppose in today's debate on our side of the house, particularly your choice surrounding the romantic love and choosing the love partner in itself is a primary source of the fulfillment of the individual's life. That kind of the norm we like to oppose on our side of the house. So the first issue about how the pressurization hinders the ability of the individual to choose the best happiness for them. Simply because the norms surrounding the romantic love are the culturally and historically and socially constructed and become the central value and the dominant value in the person's life. Two reasons here. One, about the intergenerational structure hinder the ability for that individual. Two cases. Firstly, about the vertical construction. Our existence and our life are predicated upon the consequences of someone's romantic love. The reason why I came here is my parents love each other and bring the baby me. That's why the existence of that individual and continuation and maintain the society in itself is one of the present and gift from the parents. That's why in intergenerationally and vertical construction, individuals' life are determined by the love. Secondly, the horizontal construction. Expanding the social media enable us to share the happiest memory and happiest experiences. That's why if your friends, if your cousins, if your sister, or if your brother hold a wedding ceremony, maybe you can post, you can share that photo or the movie in Instagram. That vivid and glamorous and beautiful images constrain and internalize the images. Love in itself is a primary and a fundamental happiness for the individual's life. Secondly, about the media exposure in itself also hinder the ability for that individual. That's why the romantic drama or the hugely consumed and created through the media and through the capitalistic society we need to regulate on our side of the house. Two reasons here. The second analysis is about the inside relationship with the love partner and the friendship in itself hinder the ability. If you go to the school and have the mutual interaction with a friendship, also your friend asks you, how many chocolate did you get at the Valentine? How will you spend with your love partner at the Christmas? That kind of the strong notion gradually internalize the individual's love is a primary source of that individual. And more importantly, the relationship with the love partner in itself gradually internalize. If you are facing the turning point of your life, you may be asked by your partner, which is important, job or me? That kind of strong notion gradually internalize the individual mindset. What is the conclusion? It's about people who cannot catch up with that notion and that norm. Those individuals' happiness are hugely degraded. For example, the case of the women who like to work than the marriages, who like to choose the body carry in Japan, are structurally hindered. It is extremely difficult for them to choose their own life rather than the continuation of the marriage life. Or even if they can choose that choice is hugely blamed and criticized from society. Yeah, that choice is not so womanly choice. That strong pressurization hinder the ability. Or the case about the sexual minority, asexual, who does not have any intention to make and construct the love relationship, and hinder ability of that individual to choose that. On to my second issue. Before that, go.
The pressure to have children doesn't come from the norm that romantic love is the primary source of fulfillment, but instead a norm that things like children should instead fulfill you. Doesn't the existence of this norm actually justify people saying, I want to wait to have children until I find the right person?
So this is a comparison. Even if we consider your point of information, comparatively speaking, individuals' life can be released and can be revelated. That is a comparative analysis we'd like to bring you as a counterfactor on our side of the house. So the counterfactor is very simple. Every choice that you like to choose can be the possible option for the individual's life. Because if you are facing the turning point to choose the romantic relationship, or to choose to go to the good university, or to go study abroad, or to choose the job, you are completely and comparatively free from any forms of this coercive structure and pressurization from the society. And secondly, why it is so good and why it should be evaluated as a good option? Because the primary source, meaning that make a ranking of the individual satisfaction through the process of the internal and through the process of the external structure. The value of the life in itself should be decided by individual will, not to be decided by the other options. We are very proud to propose this policy.
They said this norm is socially constructed. We tell you no. There is a reason why this love relation became a dominant norm and perceived as one of the most primary sources of fulfillment. It is because people are fundamentally vulnerable. They do need community, they do need someone to support you. I'm gonna tell you, the world underside government will be extremely businesslike. Firstly, they didn't tell you what kind of alternative world it looks like. They didn't really tell us a counterfactual. They said job, but job is extremely businesslike. It's gonna sacrifice you and force you to stay in the office forever. Nobody's gonna listen to your grievances. It's because, the reason why people in the offices help each other, it's only because they can, mutually benefit each other, because they can gain money. And they may say money and food can be the primary source of it. But again, the poor individual who cannot opt into that option is also going to suffer. But more importantly, nobody's gonna help you when you are in the very, very moment of grievances. And we tell you, this unconditional love and this community is something fundamentally essential under our side of the house. There is a reason why this norm became the primary, this love becoming primary source of fulfillment in personal life. And that is the reason why we would like to oppose today's motion. So I'm going to be talking about mainly three things. First, I'll talk about why we can pursue a better quality of love relation under our side of the house. And secondly, I'll talk about the impact of it. And finally, I'll talk about the flip argument as to why more people can opt into that, comparatively better, at least mentally secured status under their side of the house. Before that, several responses. The first thing we need to clarify here is that they didn't fundamentally tell us what kind of counterfactual does it look like under their side. They may talk about with beautiful words that it's gonna be like food or other source of happinesses, but they didn't tell us why it will be the dominant source of it. But the second thing we need to understand is that even under their side of the house, sexual desire still continues, and the society's necessities to increase the population will still continue, because in Japan we massively fund people to have babies, and because of this aging population. So those sort of pressure from the society and those sort of necessity to be in a relation will still going to continue. What we're going to be arguing from our side of the house is that this pressure, this norm, allows individuals to second think about your relation and prioritize their quality of the relation, quality equality within your community, and we think this is something massively important on our side of the house. Before that, one thing we need to understand is that they talked about this social pressure argument, but this is irrelevant. Why is this true? Number one, we say that even under their side of the house, other sources of happiness, quote unquote, will also pressurize individuals. If they talk about, for example, riding on a Lamborghini or a Porsche is going to be the primary source of happiness, it's not something that everybody can access, right? The poor individual who cannot access it will suffer. Same thing, the second response here is that the reason why this is a social, even if we were to concede that it's a social pressure, the second reason why it is a social pressure is because, ladies and gentlemen, this concept of, the familiarness. When you think about when you were in elementary school, for example, if everybody had the same toy, for example, you want that, right? And you feel like you're disenfranchised because you don't have that same toy. Same goes for their side of the house, right? It's just saying the same thing. Just because you don't have your partner, you feel disenfranchised. Same goes to every other analysis that they're going to talk about. It's not unique on their side. But more importantly, this norm in and of itself is not the problem why those things happen. Therefore, even under their side, the one who cannot find, for example, sexual partner or the partner to have a baby are also going to feel disenfranchised anyways. Therefore, I don't think there are any problem solution on their side. That's why we think the pressure will still continue. The Kaida-san is going to still suffer in Valentine's Day in that department store. So first, let's talk about why do we think that we can pursue a better quality of life on our side of the house. Note that this pressure allows the society and the surrounding and yourself to re-say that as long as you are in this love relation, this should be your primary source of fulfillment. If you feel that you are not fulfilled, you should rethink about it, and you need to change that society. You need to change that relation. And you can opt out of it easily, right? And we think this is important because your surrounding can tell you if you feel unhappy, you should opt out of it. But what's gonna look like under their side of the house? Firstly, this relation will be extremely businesslike, right? Because the reason why your partner is staying with you is not because this partner wants to give you an unconditional love and want to spill the grievances and support you in the most vulnerable moment. The reason why this partner wants to be with you is just because you want to have sex with this individual, or just because you want to have a baby between this individual. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, when this person is in this most vulnerable mental state, this person will most likely choose to opt out of that relation in the most vulnerable mental state. We think this norm allows individuals to support each other in the most vulnerable moment. No, thank you. Second, ladies and gentlemen, we think the society is going to force you to be in this harsh relation and have a baby. As the prime minister said that your your father or your mother is going to pressurize you by saying that I want to see your grandchildren, for example. These sort of desire will still continue, right? Because this is independent from this love relation being the primary source. It is that this desire to see your grandchild, right? These kind of incentive, these kind of desire will still continue to exist under their side. That is why grandfather is still going to pressurize Kairo-san again. I don't think that he's going to be happy under their side of the house. For that reason, ladies and gentlemen, we think the quality of the relation will be drastically decreased. You cannot spill on your grievances on your most vulnerable state, and we think this in itself is extremely problematic on their side of the house. 2 minutes, next, let's go.
Why can't I have a girlfriend just because I want to have sex?
You can, firstly, because I don't think this norm is that, that strong in the first place. No, thank you. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, it is perfectly your choice. But more importantly, we think this norm allows you to opt out of it because this is about comparative. This is about how the relation should be. Under our side of the house, we suggest to you that women are most likely going to be sacrificed under our side, forced to have baby, even if you want to opt out of that relation. And we think that is something problematic. You need to compare what kind of world you want to live in. And again, you need to be reminded there are a reason why this norm have happened. It is because humans are essentially vulnerable and need a community. Second, let's talk about why do we think it's going to be better on our side of the house. So what kind of state function is likely that we can expect? So this is going to be the flip argument. Because this norm exists, when somebody don't have this romantic relationship, state want to actively fund you because this is going to be regarded as one of the most important human rights that individuals have. That is why, for example, Japanese government, for example, subsidize, for example, gokon or machikon or these kind of things, right? They really value this existence of the community. You can that individual can feel secure on the outside of the house. But the absence of it is that governments feel no necessity, absolutely no necessity to fund these good relations, but instead try to force people to have baby in order to just maintain the society. We think, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why we don't think the reason why people should be together is not because they want to have sex, not because they want to, for example, maintain the society by increasing population, but just because they want to have a sustainable community that they feel a sense of security. For all that reason, I'm very proud to propose this motion.
I actually never thought I'll get to quote Karl Marx in a love debate. Religion is the opium of the mass, and so is the concept of love as being extremely important. The reason why that's true is because when not just your grandparents and state and all that, but your society has this hegemonic ideology that love is the only or the most important meaning that you can find in your life, it diverts your attention. It makes you have to do something about that. And I think that's something extremely oppressive. Opposition cannot just say, hey, similar patterns of relations, of grandmas telling you when are you going to have my grandchild is going to happen is not enough. They have to also tell us it's going to be meaningfully different. I think it's worse when there's a norm of love, and I'll explain why. But a couple of rebuttals quickly. First of all, what are the factors that make you have children anyways, right? Because one of the opposition's main point is that, look, even there are love. The idea of love makes you able to opt out of having children because I need to wait for the right one. For some, maybe it works that way, but for many, it doesn't. His grandparents is doing that, so I don't think that just because there's this possibility that some people can use that notion to run away from it, it's true. Why is that? Because oftentimes in today's world, the child is treated as a symbol of the product of your loving and romantic relationship. So oftentimes people in general who are the one who's going to pressure you under this norm is going to pressure you to have kids, and just because you say, I want to wait for the right one, they don't give a crap because they actually want that child and just blackmail you through the discourse of you're not doing something that should be making you happy, and I think that's horrible. But the second thing is that, the necessity to have kids argument, right? I think it's bizarre. But before that kids thing, they say that the relationship in our world is going to be extremely business-like, and that's bad. We say no, that actually it's going to lead to a better class consciousness, it's going to lead to some sort of revolution, but more importantly, it allows people to actually see what are the common things that you have with each other, because you can negotiate many different factors that is going to make your life something fulfilling. We think that's healthier, that's my argument. But the second and the weirder ones that they say is that, hey, you need this norm because we need to still have kids. And I'm just very confused because there are technologies that allows you to have a child with a less biological way, like in vitro fertilization, for example. If they think the state has the ability to fund all this healthy relationship and everything that they talked about, yeah, then fund those technologies. Why must children, your generation, be treated as baby-making factories just because they think it's important? And the way that they're doing that is worse, right? I mean, if it's subsidized and all that, then yeah, that's fair, because perhaps you might feel the financial incentive is something I want to balance. But if they are telling you that if you don't have kids these ways, if you don't have this kind of relationship and all that, then what's going to happen is the state is blackmailing you. Now, unless you follow what we say, you know what? Hey, that's not cool. That's a form of guilt tripping, which I think is horrible for a couple of different reasons, which is my argument. Two things. First of all, what kind of fulfillment does our world offer? Basically, and in a more abstract sense, it's a more complex and continuing negotiation of what is going to make me happy on my own term. The fact that there's no dominant primary source of your fulfillment allows you to look at other things that prior to, in our world, basically, you don't see Facebook flooded by loving picture in Valentine's only. You see other pictures, like Lamborghini that they say, perhaps people who are working, perhaps people who have this clothes that they like, perhaps an NGO activities that they're doing, books that they've read. A lot of different things are giving people happiness. And that's the kind of world that we offer. Because the idea of removing a dominant norm does not mean something else might become dominant instead. It means that it opens a place for other types of norms and other types of behaviors to be the different sources that you are going to have. Op might want to say that, well, but if people internalize the loving idea, what's the problem? The idea is that we want people to internalize the notion that there are so many different things in your life that you can prioritize at different stages of your life, at different circumstances, that's going to make you someone happy. That's what we want. They claim this relationship is going to be very business-like because it's going to be negotiations. You're going to think about, hang on a minute, monies and workplace, they help you because they want to advance their interests in the workplace. Sure, why is that a problem? It's a very fair deal, right? They are helping you because they expect something in return. You accept their help, and you will help them in return later on. And what's wrong with that? They can't just say it sounds business-like, therefore it's bad. Yeah.
if materialism allows you to be happy under both sides of the house, and if you care about the quality of life, why don't you support our side, which gives more alternatives and more accessible alternatives that people can be happier?
That's my second argument, how love functions as an opium. So here's the thing, right? We think materialism is okay in and of itself. Maybe it's not something that Marxism should say, but why not? But the idea is that when you marry the concept of love as a dominant ideology and make it so that materialistic interests should serve that particular concept of love, it becomes harmful. What does that actually mean? First of all, it forces people to choose between economic opportunities and love. So basically, the body caddy, I'm not sure what that actually means, but I think it's the same analysis that Yoshi was mentioning, right? That people are forced to choose more often than not, your career or your love life. And oftentimes, and particularly on a more gender-based analysis, women tend to get forced out from career because they are told that you're supposed to have family. They are told that you need to marry now, otherwise you won't be able to have the love that's going to fulfill your life. That's horrible because oftentimes it makes that person tied to a relationship that's going to limit the option in the future. Because oftentimes, as long as we're living in a capitalist society, you need careers, you need money. I'm sorry, that's just true. But this idea of love as a dominant ideology makes you feel like you have to opt out of that option of pursuing career and increasing your ability as a human being, the independence of you to choose other things. This is also worse in other ways, right? Because oftentimes love sounds nice, but oftentimes love has to be expressed. How are they being expressed? Expensive weddings, marriage, like engagement and marriage rings, honeymoon, all those kind of really expensive things, and then the industry that exploits people out of that. This dominant ideology is what makes people have to invest so much resources, not just time, not just your emotions, but also the tangible resources that would have opened other options for you had this dominant norm not exist. Ultimately, what do we believe? We think that love by itself is perhaps okay. That it existing as one of the possible things that's going to make your life happy is fine. When it's dominant, it's toxic. That's why we propose.
Side opposition asserts but does not prove that there would be no dominant norm in the absence of this particular dominant norm. They say that they would prefer a world in which there would be a diverse range of norms and that it doesn't necessarily mean you need another dominant one. That may be true that in most cases you don't necessarily need it, but we think that in this particular case, it is incredibly likely that humans will seek out something else to provide them with fulfillment. That's because people crave a sense of meaning and purpose in their world, and they will turn to other dominant norms, like, for example, their family and the idea that you should give everything you have to your children, and it is your children who complete you, and without those children you cannot be whole. Or things like religion and the idea that you should give everything to your faith, and it is your faith that completes you. And we think that all of those narratives are just as bad, if not worse, as the effect of having love as your primary narrative, and it is one in which we would prefer a world where things that offer you actual fulfillment that you get through romantic love are the norms that we prioritize. So, first issue in this debate, why do we think that that love being a dominant source of fulfillment is actually an accurate norm that reflects reality? Secondly, why do we think that this is a norm that provides important benefits, particularly for women in the way that it operates and how it empowers them? So, firstly on why this norm is theoretically or factually accurate. Affirmative team wants to say that these norms are the source of a whole range of pressures, which we contend they are not. We tell you that things will still exist, like, for example, your parents wanting you to have children so that they can have grandchildren, because that's tied to things like concepts of family and having the children as being something that fulfills you. They try and say that it's related to the norm of romantic love because a baby is often seen as the product of that romantic love, which even though it's theoretically true that marriage and being in love with someone is probably going to result in a baby, we point to all of the situations in which people have children without necessarily feeling strong romantic love or attraction for their partners, and people are still going to keep doing that under either side of the world. People will still partner, people will still have children and have that biological drive to have children, so it's clearly not inherently related to the idea that you have to have romantic love as a norm. But secondly, we think that this is true because people are still particularly going to seek out companionship. Even if they do not seek out romantic love as their primary source of fulfillment, it is still nice to have someone around, to have someone to go home to, so people will still continue to participate in these relationships. And we think that it is not a bad thing for people to think that love is a primary source of fulfillment when the norm is accurate and when it is indeed something that is meaningfully fulfilling for those people. We think that people do find comfort in having someone to turn to, having the idea that there is someone who gives them a form of unconditional love, particularly when it's something that is not necessarily tied to a specific person. So this is a norm that romantic love as a concept is something that should fulfill you. And you can find that romantic love with a range of people in your life, as opposed to, say, for example, the unconditional love you might get from a family member, which can only be found from people who are directly related to you by blood. And we think the instances in which those family members do not meet that norm, for example, where your parents are do not give you unconditional love, or where, for example, your children reject you and don't actually agree with your views, those are situations in which you actually then end up feeling even more isolated. The concept that we think is better to primarily fulfill people is one that they can find in a range of situations with a range of their peers, and that isn't actually dependent on them having to find someone else, another person specifically, rather than just any person that they feel compatible with that they can love. So we finally think that the issue that they raised about kind of how women are often required to sacrifice in as a result of love, again, we would say this is not necessarily a result of this norm. In fact, we think that this norm operates on both genders. So it says that for men too, romantic love should be the primary source of their fulfillment. That's actually something that incredibly powerfully challenges the status quo, which suggests that men shouldn't be finding comfort or faith in love, and that shouldn't be a priority for them. And we think that insofar as that there's still kind of elements of sexism in our society, and where women do often end up making the sacrifices, it's not because of the existence of the norm, it's because of the existence of the patriarchal society in which all norms would be subject to that same sort of sexism. So, at the end of this issue, what you can see is that maybe in some respects, the norm does do what they say in exacerbating some sense of loneliness on things like Valentine's Day, if you do not have romantic love in your life at that particular time, but all of those same pressures and that desire for companionship would still exist even if this norm that it's a primary source of fulfillment doesn't exist. So the relative change or benefit you get to those people is incredibly marginal. What then are the incredible benefits of this norm? But first, I'll take...
Like, the desire for fulfillment exists, but why must it be answered by romantic norm is what we're asking. In your world, why is that the case? You've only been telling it's going to happen or something like that.
Yeah, so we say that the other things that desire for fulfillment to be answered by would be worse. So we think that things like your family are things that require incredible dedication to a bunch of people who are arbitrarily selected by blood to be close to you, as opposed to romantic love where you can select your own partner. And also, those are things that it's much easier to change. So you can select and have control over who you date and who you get married to, whereas you cannot really control who your parents are. You cannot control necessarily what religion you are raised in and therefore what God you believe in, and those forms of fulfillment end up then being much more coercive for individuals. So we think that's why the alternatives that you have on your side are much worse, but also we think that the world in which where this norm does not exist is actually a world that is noticeably worse for people, and particularly women. We can point to the existence of what that world actually looks like, because it looks like societies in which, for example, marriage is seen as a function for having children, where, for example, your parents arrange your marriage for you, and who you love or whether or not you love the person that you get married to has absolutely nothing to do with it. And we think that is an incredibly bad world, and that is the sort of world that you get when you don't say that love should be something that's fundamentally fulfilling, because it means that you live a lonelier life and you settle for something less. Opposition says, well, what sort of bad things do you do to pursue romantic love and just find it and fulfill you? We say you do the sorts of things like dump your boyfriend if he really sucks, and make sure that you actually find someone who does give you that source of fulfillment, because that is what society has told you to expect. They have told you not to settle for someone for the purpose of simply functionally having children with and being your life partner if they do not provide you with meaningful happiness. And we think that is most important for women, particularly in a status quo where it's women who are often given the burden of raising children. And we think that in that situation, a world in which they are not told to be able to expect romantic love and fulfillment from their partner when they bear a lot of the burdens and costs of a relationship is one in which they end up worse. We think it is also one in which it's much harder to have the conversations about why you care so much about finding someone who is right for you. So if society does not tell you that romantic love is important and that is not a norm that exists around all the people around you, it's harder to justify why you are waiting to have children or why you are not pursuing those opportunities at the moment, rather than being able to say, I'm waiting for the right person and that person is going to fulfill me. So for those reasons, we oppose.
I'll copy the deputy leader of opposition's introduction. they just asserted that there will be other kind of like dominant like source of happiness or dominant source of fulfillment that is going to be introduced in the society on the government paradigm. But they never argued why that is going to happen. In a sense that this, in this sense, this space has become very messy. In a also very bad sense that they never really explain what kind of things that is going to be more dominant. So it's not really plausible, really, to believe that anything else is going to be the taking the load of this kind of other fulfillment of happiness. And we think that the society is going to be more fairer, in a sense that people can choose what the fulfillment of happiness that they want to be, and this is just a value judgment debate. We don't necessarily have to support like the world where like people have people perceive having family life to be the dominant source of fulfillment. That is not our burden on our side of the house. So they never really did their job, to be honest. Right? 6 classes from my speech. Firstly, does this norm actually improve the romantic relationship, as the opposition side told you? Secondly, how the norm hinders the possibility for the satisfying life? And thirdly, when we compare other possible primary sources of fulfillment, is this love really, really so bad? So good. So firstly, does this norm really improve the romantic relationship, as the opposition side told you? The first premise that they had on this case was like they just assumed that every human being wants affection. Every human being wants like somebody that they can talk to. I mean, that is true to a certain extent, but like they miss the nuance coming from our speakers. Yes, people may want affection, but we have to compare whether they want to prioritize having this kind of romantic relationship in comparison to many other choices that we have, such as careers, such as what other clothes we want to wear, and those sorts of things. Or maybe buying a Lamborghini, for example, right? So it is just a lie for the opposition side to say that, well, it is a good society for everyone, because everyone wants to have a romantic relationship and everyone achieves that. That is just a dream of that they are imagining, and the premise is not filled. We think that people have diverse choices that they want to have, and there's no reason why people have to be dictated of what kind of life they have to follow. That's the first mistake that they have made. Secondly, they have talked about how, well, people can opt out from romantic relationship so that it's okay. But maybe you can opt out from one kind of romantic relationship, one partner to another partner. But the thing is, with this kind of norm existing, you just have to have some partner or somebody that is going to be your partner, and that is something that you cannot avoid. That was the analysis that's given by my prime minister, right? So they can't really talk about how because they can opt out, it is all right. No, they cannot opt out because the pressure is so strong. Even though you want to buy a Lamborghini, even when you want to prioritize your job, you cannot do that. You cannot opt out from this because there's no. Third argument they have told us about improving the romantic relationship was about, well, it's going to be business-like. The first response to that is what's so wrong about being business-like? In a sense that being business-like is having more discussion and having more negotiations, and also being more honest with your partner. You can be more honest with your partner. You can say to your partner that, well, I really prioritize my work. And you can find a partner who agrees with that and who says it is okay. That is something that is possible on our side of the house. But on their side of the house, that is something that is not acceptable to say, not acceptable for something to accept and agree on their side of the house. So this kind of honest conversation between the partners and those sorts of things is not going to be happen on their side of the house. Well, actually, on our side of the house, we can have this kind of fair deal. Second response to this kind of business strike. But although we have told you what's wrong with business strike, even if business strike was bad, I never really heard why this business strike actually going to happen. Because their assumption is like for many people, they want affection. For many people, they want like people who you can talk to. Okay, then there will be no difference in those kind of things. Many people who still on our side of the house want to have that. But for those people who do not need romantic relationship, those are the kind of the people who will massively benefit on our side of the house. So for the kind of romantic relationship, we think you're okay. Yes.
If that is the case, why can't you reject the norm if you find that it doesn't apply to your life?
I have already told you that it's structurally like is structurally embedded in people's life, both vertically and horizontally. That was my Prime Minister's argument. You should have listened more carefully. Second crash, how the norm hinders the possibility for the satisfying life. The first thing, the first response that we got is that, well, pressure of having children is still going to remain. This is just taking our example. There are many other various forms of pressure that we have talked about. But crucially, grandpa wants to see your child, but not a child from somebody who do not love, but the actual product of your romantic relationship. The implication from this analysis is that, well, this kind of pressure happens because there's a norm that says fulfillment of the romantic love is something that is a primary source of fulfillment, right? And this is the reason why we think that in the world where this kind of thing does not exist, this kind of pressure of you have to have a child is much, much lesser on outside the house. So we think that it's much better on outside the house. But they never responded to our important point, or the trade-off that you have to make in this kind of relationship. And this hinders the fulfillment because every human being have different kind of prioritization towards romantic relationship. So it opens up the kind of acceptable life choices, such as becoming a businessman or businesswoman that doesn't really prioritize your partner. This opens up your expense for having your material satisfaction. So that is okay. So this is the reason why we think that we have more possibility of your life choices on outside the house. Thirdly, when we compare other possible primary source of fulfillment, we think that this love is actually worst thing. The first thing to note here is that they never proved why other primary source of fulfillment is the compass of this debate, within the compass of this debate, because they never proved why other primary source is going to emerge. But secondly, more importantly, we think that love is really not accessible, right? Because you have to be really rich, for example. If you want to have romantic relationship, you have to look good. You have to have right kind of moral education, which really is all about the circumstances, right? So we don't think this is actually a very good thing to have a primary source because it is just not accessible. They want to paint it as accessible. This is just a lie, and this is the reason why we propose. Thank you.
So what they have considered today's debate is materialism anyway exists in both paradigms, which means pressurization to some extent exists in their paradigm as well, which we don't see any difference in this debate, right? Only and slight difference coming from that side of the house is pressurization of romantic love exists without telling us how this pressure harms people from the very beginning, right? They just use the beautiful word of decoration of people will be pressurized, and that's all, right? There's no huge impact to the extent that we should oppose this motion in the first place. If we succeed in cutting this analysis down, that means we win this debate. That's why we're very proud to oppose this motion. Two things I'm going to tell you in this space. First thing I'm going to tell you, does romantic love pressurize people? Because it seems like government wants to prove that romantic love is toxic and damaging by using the beautiful words, right? I'm going to examine whether it's true. If I succeed, that means there's less harm in romantic love and it doesn't deserve to be opposed. That's why we win this debate. But secondly, I'm going to also talk about, did they prove that romantic love is comparatively worse than any other norm that can potentially be hegemonic in their side of the house? Their side of the house just asserted by saying that there will be a diverse form without telling us why, right? We think that they will definitely be the hegemonic norm, but even if that is not true, we say romantic love should be primary source of fulfillment of a person's life. That's why I'm going to talk about these two things. Firstly, I'm going to talk my first segment, right? Does romantic love pressurize people? Government mentioned that they gave an example of Valentine chocolate by saying that, well, romantic love is going to pressurize you or something. Firstly, we didn't really hear how people are going to suffer because of this pressurization, right? We don't think they're going to suffer just because you are asked by others whether you get the chocolate on Valentine's Day, right? They don't suffer. You just make a joking, ha ha ha. I'm not the one who couldn't find. I'm not the one who couldn't get any Valentine chocolate from the girls, and you find an ally, you find a friend who also didn't get a chocolate and heal each other or something, right? This is the harm. There's no impact coming from that side. Well, the fact that you laughed proves to you that damage isn't that important to the extent that should be opposed, right? But secondly, even if the pressurization also occurs in their paradigm as well, because uniqueness was never ever provided by that side of the house. Valentine's Day's harm is the other going to disappear. Family pressurization will also exist in your side of the house because the society anyways requires to carry the baby in order to function the society, continues to function the society, right? We don't see any difference from the pressurization or as well the harm associated with the romantic love, right? But thirdly, pressurization is rather good in our side of the house, right? Because we provided a positive for the romantic relationship from the very beginning. It's something that's what you can feel, the mental security, right? You can feel that you are safe even if you lose in this debate tournament. If you have a romantic partner, you can heal each other with the partners, right? That's something that satisfies you. Satisfy your desire that you want to devote your life to so much, right? We think that's happiness that people are going to seek for. Maybe you are young, you don't know the importance of romantic love, but you're going to know anyway. After 60 years old, you're going to know the importance of romantic love in relationship, that you have a partner in your house, and you're going to feel the happiness, right? That's the kind of thing that we are going to talking about, and we think our side is much better. But moving on to the second argument, dozo.
But you are just assuming that everyone is going to satisfy your life with romantic partner. Maybe I want to forget about losing the debate, just playing video games. Why is that bad?
Well, the premise coming from that side of the house is they are just defending the slightly different motion, right? What they're saying is romantic love is being the only source, but what the motion says is this is just the primary source, right? That means any other form also exists in our side of the house. We say comparatively in our side of the house, romantic love should be the primary. That's the thing that we are opposing, and they are not defending their motion as well. Moving on to the second argument, did they prove that romantic love is comparatively worse than any other norm that can potentially be hegemonic, right? Government mentioned that there's a diverse form of norm and it is better, right? Job can take place, family can take place, your friends can take place, video game can take place. It's unfair for government that they never ever provide any hegemonic norm, and they say that anyway people are going to. We think that anyway people are going to seek the norm that can fulfill your own desire, right? Because this is the human nature that we cannot anyway deny, right? But even if diverse form is going to exist in their side of the house, people are going to anyway choose one type of form, right? For example, if your job becomes a dominant norm, you can only devote your job to the 40 years, and after retirement, I see many people who become identity crisis because you just devoted your life for 40 years, right? You are not good at sports since you have not devoted your life to tennis player or something, and you are not good at making friends because you did not have any friends because you were just working, right? On the occasion, we think in their side of the house, those people are anyway going to not be able to choose any other form. But romantic love, comparatively, people can opt in no matter what condition they are in, right? Economic condition, it doesn't matter, right? Even if you are poor, you can also find a poor person who can potentially be your partner. And also, even if you are different race, you can also find other person to opt into, right? That's why in our side of the house, romantic love is accessible to anyone rather than any form of love. If you think person's life has 100 years, we think our side is better, right? But secondly, rather what's going to happen in their side of the house is family bond is going to take place in this norm, right? As the Prime Minister has conceded, there is a norm that the family can hugely intervene to your life, and that doesn't change in the both paradigm. Clear change that we are going to show you in today's debate, as Motaki-san has required to us, is family bond is hard to opt out. The romantic love is easy to opt out, right? Because what's going to happen in your side of the house is you only have the intimate relationship with your family, and family always intervene to your life by saying like, oh, aren't you going to have grandchildren or something? But in our side of the house, you can abandon your family with your lover. This is kakeochi in Japanese, right? Clear change is we can initiate a new relationship in our side of the house. It's very easy for us because we can easily abandon. We know that there might be the negative part of romantic love. We are not living an idealistic world, but we say comparatively in our side of the house it's better. Pressurization never exists. That's why I'm very proud of both.
Two issues in reply. Firstly, what impact does this norm have on individuals' happiness? Secondly, what impact does this have on the quality of their romantic relationships? On the first issue of individuals' happiness, side affirmative tells us that you rob individuals of their ability to find happiness in other sources of fulfillment. As we just hear very clearly from Yumi, this debate is not about whether or not love should be the sole source of fulfillment in your life. It is about whether or not it should be the primary source of fulfillment in your life. And we tell you that we do not remove other people's sources of fulfillment. Instead, we focus potentially on one which is the greatest fulfillment, but acknowledge that they have a range of other sources that they can find equally fulfilling. We also point out, in a point of information, that if people are strongly opposed to a particular norm, they can reject and rebel against existing norms in society in the same way that people often rebel and reject existing norms. Side affirmative tells you that this is much more difficult because the norm, where it is a primary source of fulfillment, is an incredibly coercive one. Insofar as it is true that the norm of love is coercive, we tell you that the scale of harm of that coercion is not that great. So we firstly tell you that is because a lot of those underlying pressures do not come from this norm, but they come from your innate desires. Your desires to be intimate with other people, your desires to have companionship. But we also tell you that the situations in which you struggle to find romantic love, or which you have difficulty finding romantic love, are also ones in which you are not feeling totally unfulfilled because you have other sorts of avenues to fulfill you. And insofar as you might feel upset or unhappy or alone, that's not necessarily linked to the norm either, and it's linked to often the consequences of not being able to find a partner, like not being able to have someone to raise children with. Those are the sorts of situations that don't derive from this norm that love is a primary source of fulfillment. What that means for assessing this debate is that the true comparison is not whether or not, in the absence of this norm, people are suddenly liberated from all of these oppressive constraints. We tell you that most of these oppressive constraints still exist, and the only things they're liberated from is maybe a lesser degree of focus from wider society on whether or not they've found love, but that is actually not a very big harm in the scale of this debate. What do we then tell you is the much more important thing, and that is the impact that it has on romantic relationships. We say that this norm means that you can facilitate access to romantic relationships, and we say that romantic relationships are inherently more accessible, that they can be found by almost anyone, partly because people often find people who they partner with who are similar to them, which means that no matter whether or not you are rich or poor, or no matter what background you come from, you have other people of that background that you can find romantic love with, as opposed to other sources which are more transient or more inaccessible. They tell you that we also tell you that this cheapens the relationships that you have with other people and makes them more businesslike. They tell you that there is nothing wrong with a relationship being businesslike. But we tell you that the costs of relationships are often borne specifically by women, and in a world where they do not find fulfillment from those relationships, they are the ones who are getting sold short. We hear no response to this from Third Affirmative, and we think that this is one of the primary benefits of this norm existing, is that it tells women who bear the cost of a relationship that they deserve to get some return and fulfillment from that relationship. It encourages and empowers them to find partners that will give them that fulfillment, rather than an alternative world in which those relationships we prove still occur and those sort of social dynamics still exist, but people do not find fulfillment from them. Instead, they are trapped in them, and that was an incredible harm in this debate that was never addressed by Side Affirmative. They finally told you that often you would sacrifice things for your relationship, for example, your career or your job. Again, we told you that this would never say that this was the sole source of fulfillment, that love being the primary source of fulfillment did not demand that you give up your career or did not demand you give up other sources of fulfillment, and those were able to coexist. The fact was that when you went home, you found more happiness in that home that you were in than when you did when you were working at your desk. For those reasons, Side Negative has won this debate.
I have got the birthday, a Valentine gift this year, but when I was a high school student, I couldn't get the one Valentine chocolate from the person that I have fallen in love. The numbers of the chocolate, numbers of the gift that you can deserve at there is some memorial day doesn't automatically define the superiority or the source of the individual happiness. What we said from Side Affirmative is not to say love shouldn't be the happiness. What we said from here is the nuance is clear. Love and romantic love shouldn't be the primary source of the fulfillment of the love individual happiness and individual satisfaction. That's why my partners and my argumentation is quite important, because if that the romantic love is a dominant narrative and dominant source of the individual when we decide happiness when we choose the best option for their own life. That domination and that existence of that narrative in itself hinder the ability for that individual to choose the alternate and other option. That's why we are very proud to propose this policy. As a government reply, I'm going to bring you two issues in my speech. The first of all, does this narrative in itself become so strong or not? Secondly, is a romantic love and romantic relationship in itself is more accessible in comparison to the other option in opposition paradigm. So the first issue about the strongness of that narrative existence. So what side opposition has claimed to today is what we said from side affirmative had nothing to do with that romantic love relationship. The reason why my grandparents and my parents says to me to see or wanting to see that grandchildren or the son or the daughter, etc., have nothing to do with the romantic relationship. No, the romantic love relationship have the huge cohesive relationship with that our society. That's why if you fail to, if you have lost in the debating tournament, opposition said that loss can be alternated by the romantic love relationship. That's why if you fail to something, that alternation in itself, that the domination will highly likely to happen. That is the problem we need to talk to you from the very beginning. So having clarified that, is the romantic relationship accessible in opposition paradigm or not? So what opposition has claimed to today is about human beings have a natural desire to fulfill their own life. That's why love can fulfill the blank state in what we like to say an opposition government paradigm. So what we said is on our side of the house, that component and the blank state, what the opposition like to fulfill on their side of the house, can be the possible option for their own life. For example, the religion, for example, the working, for example, the hobby that I participated in the debating tournament. That any option can be alternated when you face and when you have to choose the one option than in the other options. That is a very important point. So the opposition reply told us the women can choose their own life and fulfill their own life. What we need to recognize is about a hierarchical structure that exists in the society. Women and also the sexual minority are the victims of that norm because the society does not prepare, does not have any interest to directly catch up the demand of that for that individual, that because of the existence of the romantic existence. So and also they told us about family intervention, that the family intervention becomes harder on their side of the house. Because if you fail your job, you can be the better if you have the boyfriend or the girlfriend. And also if you, after you are retired, if you are alone, that condition are called very miserable situation. That's why what opposition would like to impose for every individual is one of the tyranny of the love romance. We are very proud to propose this policy.